Okay, so I hope this is recording my voice and everything. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about, oh, nope, wrong tool, about derivatives. So, what are they? Whenever you hear the term slope of the tangent line, we are referring to derivatives. As for notation, we commonly either use, it's called Legman's notation, and it looks like this. So d over dx. Now, as for this x right here, that is when we are dealing with f of x. So whatever this variable is, it's dependent on this variable. Or we also use the notation f prime, or the little apostrophe for derivatives. Now, so basically, anytime you see slope with a tangent line, just remember we're talking about derivatives. Same thing whenever, as for notation, d over dx or f prime. Now, how do we do derivatives? So, the first thing that I learned whenever we were doing derivatives were limits and to use the definition of derivatives. And that's a long formula, and if your professor isn't going over it just yet, I wouldn't worry about it. So I'm going to teach you about the power rule, the product rule, quotient rule, all those rules. So basically, we have, and I'm going to look at your question, one of them. Let's see, let's look at 28. Okay, so we have x cubed minus x. So how do we find d over dx of this? So what we do is we do a thing called the power rule. And the power rule says that what we do is whenever we have x of n, here, let me just give that. Okay, so whenever we have f of x is equal to x of n, f prime of x, or the derivative, will be n x of n minus 1. Okay, so what does this look like for this question? So let me do it like this. So f prime of x is equal to, you're going to bring down the 3 as the new coefficient. So 3, we leave the x, and then 3, which is our n, minus 1, well, that's simple, that's 2. So 3x2 is the derivative of x cubed. Now, what about for x? That's by itself. Well, the derivative of x is going to be 1. Though, remember, anytime you have a coefficient that's just by itself, so say if it was x cubed minus x minus 2, we would have 3x minus 1 minus 0, because the coefficient always equals 0. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Okay, so now that we have our derivative of our problem, we know how to use the power rule. This is the most simplest one. Now, what about, I see that there's some trig identity. So, for example, in 26, let me, 26, how we have f of x is equal to 3 cosine x. So I'm going to give you a list of the trig derivatives. These are ones that you need to memorize, or if your professor allows you to have like text cards or notes or anything, I suggest you write it down. But as you start doing all of these, you're going to start remembering it. So f prime of x, let's make this a table. So we have, let's start with sine, cosine, and tangent. Now, of course, there's other ones like cosecant, all those. We're just going to focus on these main three right now. So the derivative of sine of x is cosine of x. The derivative of cosine is negative sine. The derivative of tan x is secant squared x. So what do we do? So we see that we have this part, but we also have this 3 that's stuck on there. Now, another tip of advice that my professor gave to me whenever we're looking at derivative, or whenever we're going to do derivatives and all that stuff, is we kind of break down the problem. So what is this problem looking like? Well, it's saying 3 times cosine of x. But we don't know how to do that quite yet. We know how to take the derivative of basics like this, like subtraction, or if this was addition, you would just flip that like that. But we don't know how to do multiplication. So that's when we use the product rule. And that says f prime, the derivative of f, is equal to, we do f prime of x times g of x plus g prime of x times f of x. Now, what in the world does this mean? So, we're going to take this as our f of x, and we're going to take this as our g of x. Simple. So, we're going to just do it like that. So the derivative of f of x, which is 3. Well, remember what I said earlier? Whenever we're doing with coefficient, the coefficient also always equals 0. So we got 0 times g of x, that's just cosine of x, plus, we're going to flip it. So what's the derivative of g of x? Cosine, well, that's negative sine. So negative sine x times f of x, which is 3. Okay, well, this is equal to 0. So now we have negative 3 sine x as our answer for this one. This is how to do the power rule and the product rule of derivatives. I'm going to start a second video to show you how to do the quotient rule and how to do the chain rule, because I don't want this video to get too long. And again, I know this isn't directly what your homework is asking you, but you should know, not that you should know, but your professor should have told you and showed you how to do derivatives before throwing out slope of the tangent line and secant line, because that's like way after. But this is what I'm going to send to you. I'll be back.